The Federal Reserve wants you to know that everything is going to be A-OK. But is it the truth? You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. In today's video, we're going to talk about the Federal Reserve, everything, ins and outs, what's happening right now. And let me tell you, March is going to be something to behold for many years to come. I'll tell you why. First thing, the Fed's preferred inflation gauge falls below 3% for the first time since March of 2021. This is the biggest news because they can, look, they manipulate this. We know that, okay? It's obvious when prices are rising, everything is going up for the most part. They can manipulate these things, and that's the entire design of the PCE, personal consumption expenditure. That's why they use it, because it's generally very muted. Even during the worst of the worst time, I mean, it wasn't that high compared to where inflation actually was. But the point here is when we look at these things, these gauges, what does it do and why is it important? I mean, it's obviously manipulated. Well, you have to understand something. The Federal Reserve is looking at that. Businesses are looking at that. I'm talking about the big corporations, of course, and the government itself. They're all looking at the CPI and the PCE. So we also need to pay attention so that we can stay ahead. Look, if I say inflation, the real inflation level is 15%, therefore, see, you might go to Shadow Stats and other places, oh, it's 15%. Well, or whatever the number is today. That's fine. But there's a therefore inflation too high, and so interest rates will remain high. But you're doing that based on that stat that they don't work off of anymore. So keep that in mind. That's why here at this channel, I give you both stories. The manipulated story, the true story, and then we say, look, they're going to be going based on this one, but you and I, we know the real deal. You got to know both sides of it. That's where these other YouTubers, they don't do that. They say inflation, 15%, real stats, here it is. Therefore, interest rates are going to remain high, and this is going to happen, so on and so forth. Big collapse. Just wait it out. You're going to be able to buy those assets for pennies on the dollar. We're so smart. Buy my course. It's only $1,000. Whatever. Anyway. Looking at this, I could see the stats. They add up. This is what they wanted. This is big, okay? Core PCE inflation has been running at an annualized pace in line with the Fed's 2% target for 7 months now. This is important. It's coming down, and if so, that gives them the ammunition they need to say, yes, we are going to cut rates. Many have started to talk about March as the time, but it's not 100% like it once seemed like it just a little while ago. It's now potentially going to come later, so maybe we'll find out about that in the coming days as to, more of a hint. March being the first possible time. It's not going to come before March. There's no doubt about that, unless there's some catastrophe. But it seems like March would be the first potential, now being pushed forward a few months. The U.S. economy grew at a blistering 3.3% pace in Q4, while inflation pulled back. Wow. So wonderful, right? The GDP is doing well. That means the economy is doing well. And hey, the consumer, yes, they have to pay more for everything. Yes, they're suffering because of inflation, but that makes the GDP look good. Ah, great. Okay. And so you look at this, it's growing. They're showing growth. The United States apparently is strong. It is strong. Yes. Well, I mean, I guess if you compare it to Europe, I guess it is strong. I guess if you compare it to nothing whatsoever, I guess it is strong. It depends how you want to look at it, though. In their manipulated statistics, I guess it is strong, right? But people don't feel strong for the most part. That's a problem. Fed rate decision could be the prelude to a March cut. That's where we start getting into the interesting stuff. Because if now you're seeing these numbers come out. Oh, growth is there. Inflation's down. What does that mean for the Federal Reserve? It's huge. It's really huge. All right. And so, we get this information. It comes out. The Federal Reserve is going to do one thing or another, but not yet. Okay. And so we'll see what happens. But certainly we're coming at this time in which the Federal Reserve needs to at least suggest what they're going to do, because there's too much uncertainty. They never want to be, they use what they call Fed speak, but they never want to be too precise, but they want to give the market enough. Demand for the Fed funding tool hits a record before the rate hike. And so looking at this, the bank demand for the tool climbs to a fresh record at $167 billion. That's the Bank Term Funding Program. And this is coming at a time in which we're being told, hey, everything's okay. But you look at the usage of this program continuously going up. It was an emergency program. And so they're using this like we never seen before. All right? Billions of dollars are being sucked up by this thing, and they're not going to the other methods. They're not, utilizing this in a different way. This is something that they are consistently going for. That's worrisome, okay? They're talking about the whole risk-free arbitrage, which I've covered in previous videos. They basically borrow from the big banks were borrowing from this, and then they would park that money at the Fed, and then they make that difference. They make the spread in between the two, but the Federal Reserve has decided to cut that off. No more of that. Some are starting to say that this could become a problem because the small banks need to utilize this still for an actual source of funding. They need it, these regional banks, and those are the ones tied heavily to the commercial real estate. Heavy exposure to commercial real estate, and at the same time, that's really where the weakest link is. So you see the problem here? They're going to take away the source of funding that they need, potentially, at least that's what they say. They're going to take it away, and those are the ones that are the small banks, the regional banks, and those are the ones that are really exposed to the commercial real estate, which is really weak right now. That's the weakest link. This is the biggest problem. If you want to know what is the key takeaway here? Commercial, think about it. Commercial real estate, looking at the small banks, and then understanding the BTFP. Those three, the connection in between those three, as well as just debt in general, as it's unfolding the way it is, that is a problem. But knowing these three, I think, is really imperative right now in the coming months. Now, we got an issue. You got the Fed's BS. No, not BS. What you're thinking. That's the balance sheet, okay? Looking at it compared to the S&P 500, basically the stock market, and we do see a problem because, I'll show you this, okay? You can see the balance sheet going down. Generally, balance sheet goes up, stock market goes up. Balance sheet goes down, stock market goes down, right? But something else has changed, and everybody on the Finance Friday live classes know all about it. We talk about the reserves. All right, now this is where it gets interesting, right? Because these commercial banks, they take the excess cash that they have, they park it at the Federal Reserve. And that's important, all right? Now that is the thing that's been mirroring the stock market very closely. And of course, we need to see this, by the way, that we're going out of whack again. This happens, it does happen. But what I see is a big mix-up coming in March because we've got somewhere around $550 billion a day at this time in reverse repos that by March will be down to zero potentially. And that is part of making everything move right now. This is keeping everything in check. And if they end the BTFP, if the reverse repos go down to zero, if we do have the potential for a crisis to unfold, it's going to come in the next little while. We got to pay attention to it. I think that, for the most part, they have pumped in a lot of cash. And so that stuff is still sloshing around, and we haven't heard about many failures come in the last little while. So how are they going to handle it? I don't know, but this is where the problem is. This is where it is. We'll pay attention. We'll keep it close. Hit the thumbs up so that you're notified of these videos when they do come up again. Okay. I think it's extremely important for everybody to get wise to what's going on in the commercial real estate world, to understand what's happening with the Federal Reserve, essentially extending their hand, saying, here's the loan, here's the emergency for you small banks, but the big banks are the ones that were taking advantage of it, obviously for obvious reasons, helping out their friends. But that's really something that we should be keeping a close eye on. Okay. Now, if you're not already, you got to be able to get into the finance live classes. It's a small Zoom class. We get into these type of things each and every day. I talk about the money mirror method. Have you seen the money mirror method? If not, I do have a video about it, but we get into the depths of it. Okay, I show you that, give you updates each and every week. I look at the GPTs that I created. Within those GPTs, basically, I made it analyze all previous cycles before it, put them all into different buckets. And from those buckets, I compare it to the current circumstances. So it's able to look up the current circumstances of GDP, of all these things. And then it compares to the previous instances and says, hey, which one is it most similar to? And what's the differences and why? And then brings you a report that comes out. And then it just essentially says, hey, those are the companies that did well before. These are the ones that did well, in these circumstances based on high inflation, based on high unemployment, based on this and that, and what are equivalent companies and why, always why. So we understand, we don't just take what it says. These are the things that I do talk about each and every time on the Finance Friday live class. I hope you join me there. There's a link in the description. Of course, I'll see you tomorrow. Take care.